Welcome everyone to Face Off. It's the third week of competition for the Smite Pro League. We are, just to get out of the way, we are aware of the issues there with the spectator client. We apologize for the delays that come out today. The matches are completed for the European side of things, and we're moving on into the future as we get everything all sorted out. But of course, if you're wondering what's going on here, I'm Drybear, and this is actually our newest addition, first time on camera here for Smite. This is going to be Mr. Gandhi.
Yeah, hi. You're much taller on camera than you are in real life. I'll give you that. I look very short.
Maybe you just slouch is what it is.
I do have bad posture. That is a problem I have.
Is it?
No, it's not. I actually carry myself of my posture. I think I have great posture.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, but
how tall are you?
Apparently not. I think like 5'11" and a half.
Do you know?
I don't know.
5'11" and a half.
I don't want to be in that problem where like I don't know my height, so I just say 5'11" and a half.
Well, is it just going to be 5'11"? Because I know people like to add the half,
nope.
even though it's not there.
Nope.
You know?
Nope.
Like if you're like 4'11", you always say 5 feet.
Well, yeah,
just
you have to
because
or else you're like a midget.
Right, but then if you're 5'11", do you say 5'11" and a half?
I think so.
Is that what it is?
I think I just want to be like,
because I'm 6'3", and I don't add any halves or negatives or anything like that. I just shoot it out there and it's done. That's it.
Okay, we get it. You're taller. I understand. All right, I am the shorter one here. But so week 2 was actually a pretty exciting week here.
It was, definitely.
We actually saw some teams actually start getting some wins, mainly Exposed Secrets and Dignitas. What did you think of Dig last week?
Dig looked really sharp, so it was actually pretty rough in the beginning. What happened is they actually, the first match of their week, they decided, let's just feed less. And for good reason, right? He was playing incredibly well. They decided, hey, let's give him a bunch of gold, got a bunch of experience. We saw Naw actually end up giving him mid camps and then also giving him waves, and then it just took off from there. This, of course, was going to cog red, and that's one of their biggest wins, right? Against an undefeated team at the time, able to find a big win right now. And cog red is still only loss they've had so far is against Dig. Dig looked great.
Yeah, and the thing that was weird, too, was that Dig was in that weird situation where they were almost 0-5, right? They're going up against cog red. We looked at the matchups, and we were like, oh, this is not looking good for Dignitas, and they were able to pull that one out. But then, like, their next matchup versus Snipe, it was like, what is going on here? Because Snipe, they almost threw it. It was like 22-20, and then they tried to like dive in on the Titan, and it just flopped miserably for them. But they were luckily able to pull it out. I think they stopped playing ranked matches, and they started focusing on themselves as a team.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right?
Yeah.
And these are all streamers. That's one of the biggest things you're going to see about this is that when you have a team full of streamers, well-known public figures, they tend to just stream and play ranked matches, answer questions, field, ideas into their chat, and kind of just have fun, whereas they really need to be scrimming a lot. And what scrims do, and really, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, the fact that if you're very, closed and you like to hide your strats, if your strats ever get countered, you don't really have that kind of live, impromptu reaction where you can adjust on the fly. And so because they started scrimming a little bit more and bringing the ranked solo a little bit less, it meant they were able to kind of come together as a team.
Yeah, and I think we're actually planning on talking about this later on, but there's so many times where you develop these terrible habits from ranked, and you know it too. You're like, oh, I could buy this ward, but... No, I don't need this ward. This ward's a joke. I don't need this at all. So it's good to see that, but the next one is going to be Exposed Secrets, which I think they won today as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they looked really good.
Well, Zayla ended that game 12-0-7 in fantastic fashion, looking
borderline
very
impressive.
Good. So, I mean, the first week for Exposed Secrets was a little awkward. They started that first match of the SPL in the first week with an Odin, Freya, with a Zeus in the mid lane. It was very strange. At that time, Odin was widely regarded as the worst character in the game. Zeus, widely regarded as one of the worst mages in the game competitively. Very difficult to make work. And they ran it, and it didn't work, obviously. So it was a tough pull for them. And they kept running the rest of the week. I mean, they toned it down a bit, but they kind of picked very strange, unconventional things, trying to reinvent the wheel, which some of it worked, some of it didn't. They went into week 2 refreshed, reinvigorated, and they came out strong. They found a lot of big wins. There was Exposed Secrets climbing the charts, and Azalea looking so good.
Yeah, Azalea looks really good. But I think that's not bad. When you look at it, I mean, this is a very long week here and a long season that we have. Week 1, you can kind of throw stuff new there and try to pick the other teammates and be like, okay, can this work for us? It's early on. And they tried to make something work, and it didn't. So they adapt, they go back to how things are supposed to be played, and they're able to pull out big wins. That's still good because when you play against these top players, you're gaining information, no matter what it is. So granted, it is a league, and you don't want to try anything too crazy because, your rank does matter, but it's still not the worst.
Well, I think the biggest part about this as well, and, it's long comparatively to other leagues, but at the same time, it's still 7 weeks competition. The middle of that, the 4th week is actually off. So you have 6 weeks total to compete. And the top four get locked in for that regional championship. The bottom two get kicked out. And so, when you really want to look at that score, I mean, if you're in the 3-4 range, maybe 2, you're feeling good, right? Because you're going to be making it to the regional championship. You have a good seeding going into it. You have a good chance of making it to the Smite World Championship. But the thing is, if you're experimenting a little too much and you spend those first 3 weeks kind of just spending it way out in space and figure out what you want to do, and you get sent down into the wild cards, that's rough.
Yeah, the wild cards is definitely going to be the scariest part, just because you come up through the Challenger Cup and you're going against people who are hungry. They've been watching you this entire time, so it's like, oh, they know this. I'm getting target banned. This is actually scary, which we're finally starting to see here in the SPL. People are like, okay, yeah, that guy is gone. You're not getting him at all. You're not having that team comp. We are getting rid of that right away. So that's good. Now, although we did have restoring wins, we did have a lot mishaps there in week 2. I guess starting off is going to be Nantan saying goodbye.
Yes.
What? Now, Nantan had a very rough game.
Yes.
To say the very least. I think there's a lot of mental mistakes he had as well, but what was your take on that?
A lot of this came down to availability. We've seen this before. Players that don't have the time of day to spend practicing and preparing, and this is what happened, right? When Hi-Rez had his hiatus and came back into Smite, you could tell that he knew what he was supposed to be doing. He knew he understood the game.
Yep.
He just didn't have the muscle memory. He didn't know that get the ultimates. He was missing hammers on Thor. His ult was missing on Thor. Bastet scratches were missing. The cats were coming out at wrong times. It just comes down to having that muscle memory and that practice and preparation, where when you activate the skills in order, it's quick, it's fast, you know what you're doing, you can do it fast, versus the players that have to think about everything. When you spend that mental process time, it takes a lot longer to get those kills, which, at this level of play, there's no time to waste.
Well, it looked like Nantan was still just making those tiny mistakes.
Yes.
I mean, he was going up against a Sobek there in week 2, and
he picked AMC.
He
picked AMC. So that's not just a mechanical thing.
Oh, trust me, I get it. I understand. But even still, there's little things, like you're going against a Sobek. You die once, you probably buy beads. You die twice, you probably buy beads. You die 3 times. If you don't have beads, I don't know what you're doing.
Well, he died 4 times and they got beads. So
the
fourth one
is when you retire.
Yeah, is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so.
Coming to fruition. I mean, that's it. Of course,
the timeline.
Nantan felt a lot of frustration. As a personal player, especially performing at a high level with the top 6 teams in North America, he said, this is too much pressure for me. I obviously don't have the time or the desire to practice as much as I need to be at this level, and I'm just going to gracefully step down, allow my team to pick somebody else up. But, in his absence, they took Fusion OP, the solo laner, who runs Chronos all the time with that Doom Orb, put him right into Hunter. Say, hey, you're playing a Hunter-based mage in the solo lane. Why not just play Hunter, and then replace that solo laner with somebody else coming into the roster there? So a big pickup.
Yeah, I think it's going to be big. It's so weird. Luckily for them, the next week is going to be the bye week here, so this is going to be good. If you're ever going to make a change, week 2 is okay. You got to just grind through this, and then you have a full week of practice ahead of you to where you can kind of get everything ironed out, which is going to be okay. That's going to be good. But, there's a lot of synergy that goes on with a team. You have to work on the communication. Some call-outs might be different. Routes might be different. So there's going to be, obviously, some hardships they have to overcome, but hopefully it works out for them, because this is the halfway point. It could get a little bit out of control for them.
Yeah, it definitely can, and so far it has kind of get out of control. And one thing I want to mention, which is on the top of players having issues, we also had Trixtank, of course. Trixtank had a lot of disconnect issues. It came to the point where one of those matches last week, Zimstar had to sub in for Trixtank. And it's the same exact thing we were talking about with Nantan. Zimstar knows this game. He's the manager for TSM. He was a competitive player before himself. He's always been on sponsored team, and he's the one who's heavily and emotionally vested into Smite. He just loves Smite. He knows the game, but again, when he came to the game, you could tell his timings were a little bit off. His understanding of the matches was great, but he couldn't get the same skill shots that he needed. And so that was tough for TSM to constantly lose Trixtank. Actually, one of the times he ended up dying to a tower. The next time he ended up falling to... He actually got body blocked by, I think it was Reels that actually body blocked him and prevented him from going to the tower. So good stuff. Yeah. But I mean, it's tough to have that kind of disconnection where you have to spend the 3 or pauses a game to keep him in the match. He's disconnected, getting interrupted, and that kind of thing. So it was rough for TSM. They found a great win in the beginning, taking down Mortality, but it's still looking a little rocky.
Yep, and of course in week 2 we always have the unconventional trends and picks here, this is probably the most exciting thing to watch from going from week 1 into week 2, but where item-wise, everything's getting a little bit crazy out there.
Well, we're actually
especially
noticing
now with the new items.
Definitely. Well, that's a whole other topic. But the biggest thing, right, is that we're seeing that when you have this high level of play, it all comes down to one initiation. one spell, one poke. And we're seeing a lot of Magi's Blessings come out. They're going to prevent that one grab. Athena comes in, tries to taunt people, pops a bunch of Magi's Blessing. And it's hard, right? Because it's very easy to have your Magi's Blessing popped and then just disengage for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, wait for the next fight to start. It'll pop in the middle of the fight. And, of course, that CC won't be there. So we're seeing a lot, anywhere from 4 to 8 Magi's Blessings in one single match just to prevent the initiation from the enemy team, because it all comes down to you've got Serket in there. She's going to get that madness on you. Yeah. She's going to stab you with her little stinger and get on top of you, force you away, and then crit you on the way out. And so, you only have a small window of time. Even against a Hunter, if a late game Apollo comes up to you, it's just going to take a few shots and then you go down. So it's really hard. And it just
yeah, it is tough, dude. But, I got to say, I really like the fact that Heavy Hammer has been like a thing, dude. I really, really like it. Are you against it?
I love
it. Come on.
I love the fact that it's being picked up because you can't ignore it, right?
It's possibly the best
level
1 weapon. Getting out of the game. It really is.
And you bring up a good point. One criticism I have for some teams, I saw some teams, Hi-Rez at one point ended up picking up the Heavy Hammer as a 3rd item after boots, which was strange, right? Because it's an 1100 gold item as it stands right now, and it has that 20% slow on it, plus a little bit of physical power, and of course the HP. And so it's kind of like a good balance early game. You get some power, some HP, plus a nice slow on your attacks. We even saw it today in the first matchup. Actually, 2 of the members on the side of, we had, of course, C9, where Emilito picked it up, and of course we saw NQ in the solo lane pick it up.
How dominant was NQ, by the way, bro?
Well,
I know we only watched a little bit of it.
It hurts.
But, Sayo, my man, the feels, bro.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
Well, that's the hard part, right? Because when you get close, if they get that first hit, applies the slow at 20%, and they can just keep hitting. Even as a character with Loki, which has the slow immediate during the Vanish, right? It's hard for him to get away once that Vanish ends or he doesn't have it available, especially if he pokes with the Vanish, can't disengage.
So what do you think players are going to start doing to counter the Heavy Hammer? Being early. Is there anything yet?
Well, there is. I mean, we have the Witch Blade, which we have the winged blade, which prevents you from being slowed, and of course, it will remove the slow and also make you slow immune for a few seconds. So that allows you to kind of prevent that. But I think the big thing here is that if you're going up against a Heavy Hammer, I'm going to see a lot of teams play more passively early because at like 5-6 minutes, the Heavy Hammer has a slow, but you're also delayed on your build, right? Because you see people that build in the jungle, like a Thanatos, right? Thanatos is probably one of the most notable junglers that picks up the Heavy Hammer. If you don't utilize it early, you're delayed on your build. You're late on pen, you're late on lifesteal, you're late on a physical power, you're late on even crit if you're playing Serket and you pick it up. So a lot of times you just have to wait for that kind of sizzle and ferment itself into what's going on, and then at like 8 minutes when they don't have any pen, you fight.
Yeah, but it's still going to be very difficult. I mean, right now it's push. I'm going to shove my lane. I'm going to deny you XP and force you out. But now with this, I mean, they're going to have to basically tailor it completely to it. That's a quick transition to make to go from, okay, we're getting into engagements right away to we have to wait till 8 minutes.
Well, it also comes down to positioning, tuu. I mean, it just comes down to passive play. I mean, we see a lot of mid laners now buying 2 wards instead of 1. They ward up both sides of the mid lane. They have vision across the board. And they sit back and they set their tower, of course. And here's the natural idea of a slow is that you want to have distance to move, right? If you're too far away from your tower, the slow's going to kill you because you got to walk that long trek. Versus like a stun where you can still get killed under a tower, that kind of thing. So if you're at mid-range or close to your tower, now it's great for solo. It's great for long lane as well. When support picks it up, Hunter's got a long way to go. But a lot of times it's tough, and I think it just comes down to the fact that it's now being solidified in a more recent sense. So people are like, oh yeah, that's a thing, and they forget, and they go back to the tower, and it's too far away, and they die.
Yeah, well, I think it'll take a little bit of adapting to get used to it, but overall, I love it. I think the fact that we see it on supports is a good thing. Right, because now that long lane doesn't get out of hand too much. I mean, we start to see, ADCs steamroll, and I think or hunters, excuse me, steamroll. But I think that's a good thing. I know, it's a habit. It's a habit. I know. I knew you were gonna do it as soon as I said it. I was like, oh, God, I'm gonna have to deal with him.
Yeah, it is a good thing. It really does help certain certain players playing a guardian role with not like basically an assassin.
It makes them feel useful too.
It allows them kind of like transcend more into a guardian-esque style, even though they're playing an assassin kind of thing. It really helps. I mean, they're able to get close, apply a slow, especially if they don't have any CC. We saw Nemesis played with it, of course, has the slow on the slice and dice, slow on the heavy hammer, slow on the ultimate.
Wukong? Do you think
the Wukong
with the heavy hammer? Do you think Wukong becomes a viable support?
I think Wukong is definitely viable now, regardless. I think that he has 100%. Been forgotten. Yes, I mean when we made the Masters Will change, people are still actually picking up more points into the Jingle Bang, which is not the good way to go. I mean, the number 2 is flat mana. It has a lot more damage on it now, and of course a shorter cooldown.
Doesn't it only do spin in a circle? Mana, right?
Yeah, it's 50 mana flat across the board. easy spell to use. Of course, has good damage on it. Now, he used to have the knock-up, which means he's less of a Guardian, but he definitely can still be played as a Guardian. And the fact that he's got a lot of physical damage, single target stun, good burst, and ultimate prevents him from dying, it means that he can definitely work in the Guardian role. We've already seen Nemesis a lot. I think actually Sun Wukong would be a lot better fit than Nemesis.
I think so too. I think just the fact that Sun Wukong actually has a stun is good.
Yeah.
I think that already puts him ahead. But taking a look at it here, we talked about it a little bit earlier, right? School, daily life becoming a big factor here. I mean, school's back in session. It is September. In the summer, everything's a little bit different. We're starting to see new faces. How do you juggle school and the Pro League, right? Because we're starting to see it take a toll.
Well, we're already seeing that explicitly with Team Coast, right? They're
Team
all
Coast,
younger kids. They have, jobs. They have school. They go to school all day, and then they come and they're like, okay,
real life kids, man.
I've been doing all. Yeah, that's the whole point, right? It's
real life.
At what point do you decide to just put all your eggs in one basket? Because you're looking at it's like, well, school and work is great. I had this really great thing I have going on with Smite. I want to compete, but can I do both? Is it detracting from both? And the answer is usually yes. It always is detracting from both when you try to do them at the same time. Coast is having a trouble time because they have 8 hours before that, then they come home, no time to practice. They warm up a little bit and they play, and it really drags them down in their play style.
Well, yes and no is my thing, right? Because it all comes down to time management, which everything does, right? Now, granted, they've been up early. They have to sit there. They're grinding, and they're getting their feet wet, and they just have to play a warm-up and hop into it.
Right.
But even still, luckily for them, the league only locks in the top 4 teams. It's not like they're completely out. If the bottom 2 dropped out, I would say, okay, we should probably revisit this. But since it doesn't, it's still okay because it's like, okay, look, these guys know that they have the Challenger Cup coming up there. We're going to play the top 2 people there, depending on their seed. They either play the number 1 or the number 2. It's not taking them completely out of the league, so we can't say, oh, we got to change this. Instead, it's like, oh, okay. Well, these guys, their backs are against the wall at this point. I mean, looking at the record, I believe, they're 1-6. It's not looking good. And after today, I believe they're 1-7. So it's like, fortunately for them, they're not completely out.
Well, that's the big thing, right, is that you're looking at Challenger Cup, and I think in a lot of people's minds they expect, Challenger Cup, it's fine. It's totally fine. But you have to realize that, for EU, you got Potato Boys, who's a proxy QQ's team. He's been a pro player for a very long time. He didn't make it to the SPL, formed his own team of players that also were pro players or very high-ranked players. So there's definitely a lot of aggressive competition in the Challengers Cup. So when you get bumped out of the wild cards, which, of course, for those of you who don't know, the top 4 teams in the Pro League for each region will go to the regional championships. The bottom 2 teams will go down to face the top 2 teams from the Challengers Cup in a wild card format.
They're always the hungriest.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing.
So
is like,
hungry.
We're seeing teams that don't give other teams respect always lose.
Oh, it's true.
Yeah.
You can't overlook anyone. I mean, coming from, like the FPS side of things, I know, whatever. You take everything game by game, side by side, round by round. And this, I mean, it's the exact same thing. Yeah. You can't overlook anyone at all. And speaking of which, last week, we seem to have had a couple of characters get some rework done. Most importantly, the spider. I hate spiders, man.
You're going to hate him more.
I know.
You're going to hate him more. So Odin got reworked. Not as aggressive as Arachne, but of course did get a new set of abilities, except for the 1, the 3, and the 4. Arachne got reworked pretty much exclusively. All of her abilities are completely different. And of course Kukulkan, who is the old Ao Guang, is, I mean, it's the same kit, but different sounds, different tells, different animations. The ult's a little bit different as well. It's slightly thinner, travels faster.
And most importantly is that, just right now, just from all the pro players, you have a higher field of vision. Yep. So people are not used to the abilities. And I know that sounds like silly because it's like the same kit, but you change anything just a little bit. I mean, every pro player is going to take a lot of time. I mean, it's basically equivalent to changing the hoop on a basketball.
Right. Well, the difference here, right, is that you're changing a character that's been since the inception of Smite. I mean, Ao Guang's been around forever, and so they definitely understand Ao Guang to such a deep level that it's just always unconscious. It's like, Ao Guang's Squall, that's the Squall. Okay, he's slithering. Okay, I heard the tornadoes, it's going to start in 1.3 seconds. Okay, the ult's coming out, I have time to move. I know exactly where it's going. Whereas Kukulkan, it's all different tells. You hear different sounds, you're like, was that Squall or Nados? Was that the ult? Is that him? Or that's a bigger version. Okay, I'm dead. Versus, where Ao Guang, where him, you can't change a character with such history and expect people to adapt as quickly. So
Agreed.
Definitely a big difference.
Which is why we've decided to take him out of this week as well as the off week as well. So when we come back to the Smite Pro League, which I guess will technically be week 4, he will be in play. But give me a little bit of the rundown here on Odin. Odin got he got some buffs.
He's
started
scary
working
guy.
out.
So what we decided to do with him is that he's now more of a warrior, and so he used
Which
to
is
be,
good.
Originally a guardian, then more of a warrior, then a guardian warrior, and then like a guardian with, a warrior with guardian abilities, and then it was getting weird. So
you got to pick
passive
one.
gives him physical power. Of course, we made his jump do more damage. We made it so his 2 is now a shield that explodes for how much HP is remaining when it's done, or if you have it in jump, it explodes with the jump, which is actually pretty fun and explosive there. But a lot of early game damage, and of course his ultimate now a little bit different.
Yeah.
Allies can move through it.
That
Projectiles can go through it. Enemies as well. So it's definitely a lot different as far as, previously when this ultimate had a lot of downsides. You trap your allies in, you trap yourself in. This was still one of the most competitive ultimates in the game.
It was a low ELO nightmare.
It was.
How many times? Hup! Oh, well, it looks like our team's just trapped in here now.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, luckily, I think it's good.
If you guys want to see a good example of that, watch Story of Spear on my YouTube. It is just an Odin trolling me all game. It is it's bad. It is like
how bad?
It was pretty bad. Like 6 deaths. He just traps me and jumps out every time. It was. This is just bitterness, is all it is.
Oh, I can tell. I understand. Everyone has. It's
deep-seated.
Relatable, man. Yeah. That's the big thing.
Yeah,
it's relatable.
It is. It's a lot more powerful.
Do you think we're going to see a lot more Odin play coming out of the bye week?
I think he's a very powerful solo laner. I think he can definitely use in like guardian role. I don't think he's that powerful of a jungler. I think you definitely hit the jungle, and some people may disagree on that one, but I don't think we're going to see him as often in the jungle. I think he's very difficult to deal with the solo lane, and he has a lot of burst. And so when you're running mages in that solo lane, he's hard to kill. Has a great ultimate to trap a lot of the mages in. I mean, look at Zhang Kuei, you look at Habois, you look at Ra. None of them can escape the Odin spears, whereas Odin can get a lot of damage into him early. So I think he's going to be a fantastic solo pick, and possibly some in the guardian role as well. We're seeing a lot of warriors there, so I think he's going to make a splash in that. But as far as like casual, I don't know how much of a splash he's going to make.
Yeah, I can see. I don't know. I think it always takes a little bit of more time for the casual person to kind of get into like the new meta. They love like what's working for them, and they're normally a couple weeks behind. So I think down the road they'll get into it a little bit. And plus, I always loved Odin. When I first got this game, I was like, oh, I'm playing Thor.
The Allfather.
Yeah.
See the guy, the Raven, the spear, the giant horse. He's the man.
That's it. That's me.
It.
This is what I want. Yeah. This is who I am as a person. But going back to Al, basically getting reworked to Cuckoo Clan, who does that affect? I mean, the Boosh plays Al a lot. That's going to change a lot of things. I mean, this is going to have a big impact on this week.
Boosh and Stealth both play a lot of Al Guang. So with that gone, it means they have to go deeper into the charts. And we also have this same idea, right, where we're seeing people starting to ban Giannis more and ban Ra more. So as far as bans go, we'll see one Guardian ban on one side. They'll try to like ban Geb, pick up Athena. But now we're seeing more people banning Giannis, banning Ra, banning Al Guang, and targeting the mages.
Giannis needs to be banned.
He does.
Giannis is a bad man. He's
a bad man. You heard it first.
Well, dude, he has so much mobility. You can stick him anywhere. If your mid's getting countered, okay, I'm going to throw him in the solo lane, and then, oh, look at this. Giannis can get anywhere in about 0.2 seconds. I made the stat up. It's whatever, moving forward. But you know what I mean? Like, his mobility is so good. His kit is so good, and he does so much damage that Giannis has to be gone. Geb being gone should be, I think, everyone's first ban. His shield is just insane, and how many times have we seen that be a difference maker in a game?
Well, it always is. I mean, realistically, you could make Geb with just a 3 and a 4, and he would still be very good. I mean, his ult plus that shield, that's all he needs. I mean, he's so good with that. Of course, remove CC. But I want to talk a little bit about the items that came out in the past. We have Odysseus bow, and then we have the new helm. Now, the helm is going to be split into two versions, right? The helm is a physical protection magical damage item that scales upward. There's a cheap version, very cheap, so mages can pick it up on early. A lot of physical protection, a lot of magical damage on top of that one, plus some penetration. So it's good to pick up after boots, doubling that penetration flat value. The other one is going to be the other helm, the Celestial Helm, gives you physical protection, magical damage, and then when you get crit, you're then immune to crits for a short duration and get an additional 40 magical power.
Basically, what this means is the mages going to be bringing some noise, assuming this is built. I mean, you got to think right away, one of the main junglers that gets affected by this is going to be Serket. You know, you build so much crit with it, going on to a mage like that. I mean, imagine going against a Ra who has that, right? He's sitting there healing, and then you can't crit him on top of that. There's going to be a lot of big plays, and a lot of people aren't going to be sure as to why they're happening at first until this item becomes kind of a staple.
Right, well, look at this right now. You can see 40 magical damage plus 50 physical protection. When you get crit, you can't be crit again. And then, of course, you get another 40 magical. So, essentially gives you 40 magical, which, of course, is the same as Doom Orb. So, you basically, for those 3 seconds or 2 seconds, whatever the number ended up being, you have 80 magical power plus 50 physical protection, and you're just hitting like a truck. This means like hot one. Of course, means like if you get crit as a raw in mid ult, that bonus damage will hit with the ultimate as well, so you can hit him right back in the face. It's going to hurt. The other thing I want to talk about as well is the Odysseus bow. So this item was originally designed to make hunters that have trouble in the laning phase clear the way. It's a chain lightning item, has a ton of attack speed. It's got 40% attack speed, plus has a chance to proc a chain lightning effect. Now, a few things with this. It will hit the main target twice, so it is physical attack plus the start of the chain lightning. Also will bounce between targets, so it has a lot of bonus damage.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was made for hunters, as we all said, and now we're starting to see solo laners actually picking it up more. And it's at the point where everyone's like, oh my god, this thing is super powerful, but hunters are actually getting it down the road. They're getting it as like a 5th or 6th item. Why is this becoming a trend already with this item just being released?
Looking at the item, it seems like it's really difficult to purchase, right? 2,300 gold is a lot versus, when you start with Death's Toll. And here's the thing, if you're going to get it for the laning phase, you need it right away, which means you can't buy Death's Toll, you can't buy boots, you have to rush right into it, which means you have no physical power, you have no mana, you have no cooldowns, you have no movement speed. You're just buying this item for the sheer fact that it chains, which of course scales off your physical power, which it has none of. So it's really awkward because of the price and the passive that it has to build it in the laning phase to make it so it actually works. So hunters are just saying, hey, this scales off my physical power. This actually has a chain lightning effect that will bounce between people and double hits the first target. This is effectively a bonus damage item that replaces crits, right? So now it's a very strong late game item for hunters. Also for solo laners, I mean, even if junglers, right? You look at Osiris and Nemesis, they're all in-hand based. They can just hit, it'll chain between the jungle camps. They'll clear the jungle faster. They have stronger ganks.
Everyone
can also clear out the mid camps better.
And they can shove lanes better too.
That's right.
When they're going to babysit. So I guess we have a little bit of time left here. So predictions for tonight. Huh? Chunks and Dignitas here. I think everyone can kind of agree with this, where Chunks, I haven't really seen anything out of them to where I can say they are going to take down Dignitas, but Dignitas is notorious for getting a little bit sloppy there. If the game gets prolonged just a little bit longer, I have faith in my man Lassus, though. I have him taking it.
Okay, all right. Well, I think I'm going to have to agree on that one just by the fact that Chunks, and here's the thing, right? Chunks definitely have a lot of play that they can make, and I think the Cupid Fenrir is working well for them. Heroin picking up Raw, always a good thing. So I think it comes down to what Dignitas bans and how Chunks decide to react to that.
Yeah, I guess,
seems like they have a lot of backup.
Yeah, I guess the better way to phrase these kind of predictions here is what the other team needs to do, because they're both kind of landslide victories. I mean, two of the teams playing are both 1-6. So I guess on the next side here, Snipe taking on Thirst. What does Thirst need to do to win this game over Snipe?
It's going to come down to who they picked up and how they can react to it. We saw this with every single team. Dignitas looked very, very sloppy in the first week, and that's because they lost 3 of their main starting players. And then we're going to have the same thing here with Thirst, where they lost their Hunter, then they moved their solo laner to the Hunter, and all of a sudden they're having a lot of trouble bringing that back in.
Yeah. It's going to be very, very, very difficult. And looking at it, it's going to be tough. I mean, Sniper has to be the favorite going in this one.
Excuse me, I just got a correction from production. It looks like Fusion goes back to the solo lane. It's actually picking up a Hunter now. They had last week moved the Hunter role to Fusion because it seemed like he fit. Now he's back over into the solo lane.
Well, that's even more difficult when you think about just synergy-wise. That's even harder to do just because, now you're working with someone who you're not used to working. Picking up a solo laner, he's still kind of doing his own thing for a big duration of the game. Same thing with a mid or a jungle. But solo lane, I mean, there's a lot of chemistry you have to start building, Like, a lot of people are on that level where it's like, oh, I see my support moving up. I know he's going in. There's no communication. Telepathy, right?
It's rough. Well, I mean, looking forward, right, we saw the fact that C9 beat out Mortality today. So I think looking forward, Mortality's next target is Exposed Secrets. But here's the problem, right? Zalia's on fire. Absolute fire. So here's the thing. I mean, as far as predictions, I think Exposed Secrets is going to take Mortality this week.
You think so?
I think so.
That's going to be a big game there on Thursday, too. That's going to be a big one. I think I have faith in Mortality. I mean, Sayo had like a very, very difficult game today. From the little bit we watched, he got banged on like a drum pretty bad. And I think, he's going to get used to it. I mean, the heavy hammer, he gave up a couple deaths early, and I think from here on out, I think he's going to do a little bit better.
Well, I think it's a lot of weird things here for Sayo, right? That's because he picked Freya against Loki last week, didn't work. He this week picked Loki against Bakasura, and you think, okay, Bakasura's got a heavy hammer, that's fine. Loki has slow immunity with his Vanish, and he's got a teleport, but still gave up a lot of early kills. So it seems like Sayo is just having trouble figuring out how he's going to play the lane. Now, keep in mind, Sayo used to be one of the best mids in the world. forced into solo. His first week played phenomenal. But what worked for him was pushing hard and playing tanky characters. Now he's playing carries and assassins. And it doesn't seem to be fitting too well early on. So we'll see how he can adjust that landing phase. But I think the way Exposed Secrets is playing, I definitely have him take it.
Well, hopefully I'm looking at Sayo to actually make the adjustment and realize, like, okay, this is not working out. We have to go back to what was working. Why were we so dominant? Why was I doing well? If he can get a Giannis in there, he's going to be fine. We saw how many humongous plays he had last week with Sayo, and I was like, oh, my God. This Giannis is going in.
Giannis is surprisingly good.
Yeah,
who knew?
This Giannis is actually good. He does kind of
Weird.
some damage every once in a while. But for me, I think my favorite match looking at the schedule here is going to be Cog taking on Cog. The Cog on Cog hate crime here. Which one are you going to take there?
Cog Red.
Cog Red?
I got to take Cog Red there. Here's the thing. They ended up facing, once before, right? So this is going to be kind of a revenge matchup.
Absolutely.
And of course, here's the thing. Like, going to the NA Pro League kickoff LAN, Cog Prime just wrote off Cog Red. They're like, we're going to win this easy. We're guaranteed in the finals.
It's technically the sister team.
Yeah, it's the sister team. I mean, they're younger. They don't have the experience. We're veteran. We got this going into this. And then Cog Red and then they lost the first match, right? So Cog Prime won the first match against Cog Red. And then Cog Red's like, oh, I see how it is.
Okay.
And they came back, turned around. So for the next two matches, of course, it ended up being Dig and the last 4 matches of the finals there. So, for this, I think Cog Red's looking good. Now, granted, the end of last week, Cog Red looked like they were a little bit off their game as far as how they're closing out. They ended up losing to Dignitas. They had a little bit of trouble through the rest of the week. So definitely a little bit sloppier than what you're used to. But I think they definitely have enough talent on their team to have that resurgence. Thorgars.
Well, I mean, they're the number 1 team right now for a reason, right? Like, they are absolutely dominating everyone there. But, luckily for them, I think Friday is actually their last day of playing, and it is.
No, they play Sunday.
Oh, they play Sunday as well.
Against
So
Shucks.
then they have the off week. Now, this off week, which a lot of people, we're not even at the halfway point in the amount of games played up so far in the SPL. So with that said, how do these players spend their off week? Because that's going to be the big question here. Because if they slack off, anyone can take this.
Well, I think the biggest thing for them is going to be how they prepare, right? And I think we're starting to see the teams that research actually come out ahead versus teams that prepare themselves personally. We're seeing teams that play solo ranked, they scrim. But then, when we saw the younger teams, right, where we saw Exposed very well, Mortality do very well, we saw Cognitive Red, of course, there's a lot of research they watch. Who plays what? How good is it? Should we ban it? Does it work to ban it? Who should we play against it? What should our team comp look like? And it seems like the teams that kind of try to visualize and bring it up into the mental forefront instead of actually just playing to play are making a lot of difference. So I think this next week has to be a study week. The week off has to be figure out what teams were. I mean, all the VODs are available online. You can watch everything live. It's all something you can look through. So why not take advantage of the resources available to you? Study, figure out what is making these teams work, and figure out. I mean, even watch yourself. Watch your own replays. Figure out what's working for your team. Right? Do we win when we play Thorgars? Do we win when we have boost in the mid lane with Ao Guang versus Ra? John Quay to Sayo. Does that work better than Sayo on Freya? Figure out these things. Look at the stats.
Well, the big thing is that so many gamers look at it as I can only learn kinesthetically in every video game. Everyone's like, okay, as long as I just grind, I'm going to be fine down the road. That's all that matters, which is not the case. No. I mean, we know as casters, you learn so much more visually and even auditorily this way just because, you hear things and you're like, huh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I guess I'm going to pursue that way. Or just watching, you start picking up on tendencies and little things like, say, a Sentry ward's down and a Sentry, that they're going to always go for the gold Fury then. That's a huge tell. Right. It's like you got to look at it like poker. You get that tell and then you're able to act on it. And I think that's a big part of this off week that's going to really, really going to determine a lot, especially in EU, because as you can tell, I mean, 4 and 5, 3 and 4, and then number 3 is 5 and 3. So anything's up for grabs in EU. In the North American side of things, it's kind of like, hi, Suri.
Well, I think there's a fair point in saying that, when you learn something kinesthetically, you actually have it more ingrained in your mental state, right? When you suffer from a fed Freya late game, you're like, Freya's a hard carry, don't let her get any money. Yeah. That's the same thing, right? Versus when you study and you see it, it's going to be a different difference. So I think it's important to play, but it's also important to study and kind of balance it. Some teams, I mean, obviously every team researches something. They're not just sitting there and playing, but it's some teams research more versus play more versus scrim more. I think finding a good balance for the right team and also looking back on yourself, self-inflection is going to be really, really good for these teams.
Yep. So the last thing I guess we have to talk about here is the TSM Invitational that's going to be next week. Now, only 4 teams got the invite to this event. It is going to be a live event that we'll be casting from here.
Right.
What's your take on it? What do you think? You think
Now here's the thing. So as far as like the team roster,
I was gonna host it too.
We've got TSM.
Yep.
So they are looking a little shaky, but of course it's their event. So this is kind of their thing to host up. We've got C9 looking very sharp. We've got Exposed Secrets looking very sharp. And people are thinking, why is Exposed Secrets going to the TSM Invitational when it's not top? But it just came down to TSM to make the decision of who gets to go.
I agree.
So I think Exposed Secrets, I may even have them for this just because they're playing so well.
Whew. Whew. You're something else. You have so much faith in Exposed Secrets. It's almost disgusting.
Here's the thing.
Look, just because someone has a hot week doesn't necessarily mean.
I agree.
But that's what you're basically solely guessing everything on.
Xaylia fell down for about 6 months. Was not his old self.
Okay, so exactly. So
but
then
he
you
was
have a hot
undefeatable when he hit this, and he's hitting it. I'm seeing a climb.
How can you?
You gonna be okay?
I just can't believe that's how you're basing.
Who do you have for it?
I don't see. That's what's tough. I mean, Cloud9's I think looking better and better and better, especially after today's performance versus Mortality. I think they're finally getting into a rhythm. But NQ in the solo lane's got to be. He has to always have that performance as long as he can shut down. I think TSM, like everyone's like, oh, it's the TSM Invitational. Like they have the fans behind them. They have everything. Unfortunately, they're soundproof headphones, so the crowd doesn't make too big of a difference. So I'm gonna go Cloud9 with it. I think Cloud9 would be a good story. They're sitting around in the middle of the pack at 5-3 in the Smite Pro League. I think they can only go up from here.
It's a good time to actually give the details out for this because we haven't seen the specific details. So, of course, it will be starting September 20th. It's going to be happening at 12 p.m. CEST, which, of course, will be 6 a.m. EDT. So in the morning for us here in the States, and, of course, in the afternoon for the Central European people who are watching. It's going to be taking place at the Escape Gaming Land Cafe in Sweden. Of course, it'll be the TSM Invitational. The teams that are invited, as we mentioned, just to reiterate, TSM, Cloud9, Exposed Secrets, SK Gaming, all still available, of course. And it'll be a single elimination tournament with the best of 3 for semifinals, and the finals will be best of 5.
Actually, correction. It is not Cloud9. It's actually Mortality. Mortality is going instead of Cloud9. I guess Cloud9 wasn't able to accept the invite.
They weren't able to accept it, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't accept it in time because it became a timely manner. We tried to figure out where to throw in the TSM. We weren't sure if we were going to do it in
off something at the beginning there. So it's following my part. So it's Mortality, SK, Exposed Secrets.
Well, if it's Mortality, I'm going with my boy Sayo. Don't let me down. I'm kidding. You're good. But seriously.
He won't.
Oh, no, I know he won't.
He's a good man.
He's
like I said, he was one of the best mids in the world.
I know.
Yeah.
He's good. He's good at what he does.
Taking that business.
So, I mean, I'm going to blindly support Mortality here on this one then.
Okay.
Even though after everything I just said about Cloud9, that's called accurate predictions.
That's how we react to things on the fly. Welcome, everybody. So, of course, this brings the end of the show here, the big finish. We have some general thoughts in general. I mean, we've got week 1 starting up. Again, apologies about the issues today, guys. We're working through it. We'll have a schedule release today and more information. Of course, you'll hear from the tournament admin, Hi-Rez APC, and you might be hearing a little bit from our esports staff as well, just figuring out how we want to handle these things. There was a technical issue that we ran into. So, after we've seen the first 2 games, obviously C9 able to beat the Mortality team that seemed undefeatable. Yep. I mean, of course, looking very good. Game Hunter and TSM behind him looked really good, beat Mortality the second week. Everyone was like, wow, how did Mortality lose? And then we saw C9 do it. So, what are your predictions here for Mortality this week?
I think Mortality just has to find themselves again, right? Like, that's always a big thing. You always have to be like, okay, what the hell is going on here? We need to really figure out why we're starting to lose when we look so dominant. And I think a lot of it comes down to just team compositions and everything. But also, you have to think, Mortality, I mean, 5-1 up until they lost to TSM. Yeah. You get a little bit arrogant. You're like, oh, every team plays each other 4 times. Mind me as I take off my jacket here and get comfortable, right? Like, that's really what, they probably started overlooking everyone, and it's hard to not do that, but, that's where we see the best teams. That's how dynasties are formed, or by people who are able to keep themselves rooted.
Right. Yeah, figuring out what makes it work.
Exactly.
And then sticking to it and just figuring out what and keep your emotions out of it is always a big thing too. We know teams that previously have a lot of experience, but they're very high-strung. So even if they're doing really well, they happen to be going up against a new strat that some lesser team is using, lesser in as far as seeding goes, of course. But when they go against it, and they start losing early, then they start getting emotional, they get angry, they start blaming each other, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so it's also staying more just stoic, and also making sure that you stick to your basics here. So one thing we should talk about as well, Smite beating Cog Prime. Cog Prime actually fell behind. It was a Cog race. Cog Red and Cog Prime were tied. Cog Red got a win. Cog Prime got a loss.
Yeah, I think Snipe just really rose to the occasion.
Sure.
I think Snipe is... The thing about Snipe is no matter how good they do, they're always going to be treated as like an underdog from these top teams. At least that's how I feel. So every single game, they just always push for it. So I think Snipe just finally showed up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that Cog is the team that has it in them. So as long as they find find that deep-seated anger, the fact that they're losing to these teams, and kind of like 5-2 falling behind their sister team, I think it's probably the last time they've been ashamed by their sister team beating them and kind of getting ahead of them. So I expect Cog Prime to do very well this week. We know that Stealth, very strong player, Omega definitely hitting those charts, and really everyone on that roster. Jeff Hinley, definitely one of the best supports we've ever seen. So I'm going to give my faith for Cog Prime this week. But that will do it here today for Face Off, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Welcome our newest edition here, Gandhi, looking so good. You like it?
That's the nipple rub that everyone
is that what it is?
But I did it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's what I did.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. We will be releasing a schedule shortly here. When we figure out exactly what the details are, more of an announcement. We figure out what is happening and how we're going to kind of react to it. So thank you so much for tuning in today. We appreciate it. We'll see you later.